Hi, and welcome to today's webinar, where we'll be discussing new strategies to reduce complexity and unleash speed in your hybrid IT environment. I'm Andy DiBernardis from Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items to note. Our presentation and discussion are expected to run about 60 minutes, which includes time for Q&A at the end of our presentation. All attendees will be muted for the duration of the webinar. We do encourage questions during the presentation. To ask a question, you can use the Q&A panel of the GoToMeeting interface. Your questions will be addressed during or immediately after today's webinar. Also, if you're having any audio or visual difficulties, please let us know via the Q&A panel. Please note the session is being recorded, and we'll provide the link to the recording in a follow-up email. Let me first introduce today's speakers, Ashish Nadkarni of IDC and Lauren Whitehouse of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Ashish is Program Vice President for IDC's Worldwide Infrastructure Practice, which includes storage systems, software and solutions research, trackers, and other data products, and user research, advisory services, and consulting programs. Since entering the IT industry in 1997, Ashish has held a series of high-level engineering, consulting, operations, and product management positions at Bose, CSC, Glasshouse, and Autovert. He has deep architectural and management experience in systems and storage infrastructure. Ashish also recently published an HPE-sponsored white paper entitled The Future of Hybrid IT Made Simple. Welcome, Ashish. We also have Lauren Whitehouse, who is a marketing director at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. She is a 30-plus year veteran in the software industry, including several years as an industry analyst, speaker, blogger, and contributing author at TechTarget. At HPE, Lauren focuses her efforts on software-defined infrastructure and hybrid cloud. Welcome, Lauren.
Thanks, Andy.
Lauren, why don't you get us started now?
Yeah. Thank you so much. So, Ashish, I've got a slide here that I thought would be helpful in having you, kind of lay the groundwork for our discussion today. Provide us with a quick overview of current market trends, starting with digital transformation. Basically, what is it and how has it been impacting businesses?
Thanks, Lauren, and thanks, Andy. So I wanted to and thanks all for joining. Wanted to set the stage for today's conversation by talking about digital transformation as an activity, as a set of initiatives that is across the board. No one is immune from it. Everyone is affected by it. Everyone affects it. And so, you're sort of a participant as a company, you're a participant as an individual, and of course, you're consuming the outcomes in your daily lives. And, whether it is the way you travel, the way you order food, the way you do banking, or the way you interact with systems that are in the infrastructure using, your mobile phone as an example. So digital transformation is everywhere. All companies have to go through it in order to stay relevant. And really this sets the stage for what it means for an IT organization's view and strategy on infrastructure. Back to you.
Yeah, so how is this actually coming to fruition, and what's kind of required for organizations that are on this digital transformation journey? I mean, is this something that is happening, kind of in small chunks in different compartments of the organization, or, what's kind of the flavor of it?
So there are, born in the cloud companies that have started off in the digital world for whom this digital transformation is their way of doing business. And then there are companies that have been around for a few decades, for a few years, who started in what IDC calls as the second platform era. And for them, digital transformation is a company-wide initiative, but starts off often in small chunks in individual or BU level initiatives, but ultimately it sort of transcends to the entire company, and it has to be looked at from a sort of a company-wide, organization-wide initiative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think if I go to the next slide, and maybe you can talk to this one as well, because I think this IDC chart is really showing the the IT areas where investments and or changes are being made in response to this digital transformation movement. So what conclusions do you have regarding this data?
Sure. Yeah. So digital transformation is all about getting insight from data. It's a data-driven initiative, and so as you can imagine, when we are dealing with data and systems that handle data, security comes up at the top, and as you can imagine, people are concerned about privacy. People are concerned about making sure there are no leakages of their crucial information. And then next in line is the infrastructure. It is making it elastic, making sure that all aspects of the infrastructure can scale to manage the growth in data, the sort of the exponential growth in data that is a direct result of DX initiatives. And then you sort of go down the list and you look at mobility and the sort of the way in which people interact with their consumers, applications that are built to directly create these new streams of interaction, if you will. Process is a big deal because it talks about how the company transforms itself as it sort of becomes a data-driven organization. And then, of course, cloud becomes crucial in that journey, and so does the analytics aspect of data. What you're seeing is a snapshot of a study that was done in 2017, specifically on DX initiatives. I wouldn't look at one or the other as an absolute. It's all of the top 6 or 7 initiatives are important, whether they be security, applications, or infrastructure.
Yeah, and it's interesting that cloud is a little bit further down the list than some other things. And if you look at, I'll say the on-premises stuff, right? So data infrastructure ranked number 2, and then even people and process improvement ranked number 5. In relation to cloud, is cloud just not as high of an investment priority for people, or are they still trying to kind of get their ducks in a row in their on-premises environment to support cloud? What do you think is the rationale there?
Yeah, so I think when people answer these type of questions, they kind of think about the complexity of the investment as a sort of a behind the back kind of an response. And what you're seeing here is exactly that. So you could argue that cloud is just an aspect of the overall infrastructure. So you can think about, the second bullet there about data center storage, networking, compute, looking at the process part of it, and then cloud comes in it. The reason why people don't think about cloud, and this is not quite right, it needs to be addressed, which is the subject of this conversation today, is that people think of cloud as, oh yeah, I can just pay my credit card and put my credit card there and get a cloud subscription. But making it a core aspect of your infrastructure, this is where the process piece comes in. This is where the overall infrastructure strategy comes in. So cloud is definitely an important part of it. It needs to be looked at holistically as an infrastructure strategy versus a standalone, check mark, if you will.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that struck me is the applications data piece. So I get that's why we do what we do with IT, right? We want to make these applications and data be useful to the business. And I guess if you think about all the data that's being generated from, endpoints, IoT, devices and mobile, I mean, there's a lot of data that's happening out there. So is this kind of the bigger issue that customers are struggling with, is just, how to manage all of that applications and data that are coming out of their digital transformation initiatives?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's 2 ways to look at it, or 2 aspects to this more appropriately. The first is you can think of it as running the bank, which is basically keeping your existing systems of record, your bread and butter revenue intact, and you go about doing your day-to-day business. And then as you are, keeping that lights on, those lights on systems, you also are creating the bank, which is where people develop new applications. They figure out how to deal with the new data streams, analyze the data, figure out new ways to interact with customers. That whole rejiggering of their business model has to happen in tandem. So there's the run the bank, which is your main traditional applications, which are on-prem. They're usually, set up with lots of big systems. And then you have your newer custom applications that drive, newer systems like cloud-based custom applications and distributed applications and such.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of cloud-based applications, maybe you can just dive in a little bit for us on the role of cloud in digital transformation. I know that cloud wasn't at the top of the list with respect to the digital transformation priorities in your survey, but I suspect that it does play a key role.
Absolutely. And, I think we wanted to just start off by saying that cloud both on and off premises, and this is crucial because when we think about the cloud, we often think about public cloud, but private cloud and on-premises private cloud is equally important. It's a crucial foundation for all DX initiatives. Cloud shapes enterprise IT service strategies and therefore, has a heavy influence on the outcome of any and all DX initiatives. And the shift to cloud or the influence of cloud, it ushers in a new era of what we call as hybrid IT. It addresses the need of an expanded group of constituents, your business lines of businesses, your, different corporate and non-corporate IT organizations. And it includes not just the IT operations staff, but also increasingly application developers and business executives who in the current scenario, feel left out from the whole IT decision-making process, but are demanding to play a more influential role there. Cloud is a crucial foundation for DX, as I mentioned, and as it shapes enterprise IT strategy, interesting things start to emerge. So, for example, we know that the top 4 major public cloud developers have won the hearts and minds of developers, and that means most of the 80% of the new cloud native app developments, which are all custom in design, many of them are custom in design. 80% of that would be in the cloud. Similarly, in 2022, we think that enterprises are going to spend more than 20% on new IT infrastructure in edge locations. So we're talking about core and edge here, which I'll get to in a few slides. And then there is an emergence of these new industry clouds, which are very, very specific to the business, to the industry, to the vertical, and they are utilizing newer things like artificial intelligence, cognitive, and they are becoming a bigger part of the equation in many industries where people tend to want their data to be regulated. The industry itself has to be compliant, so cloud is very important, and we think that by 2027, so we're talking around less than 10 years now, 50% of new purchased enterprise apps will be cloud-based and built for industry-specific adoption. So we are going from cloud as a general entity to cloud as a very specific component of IT infrastructure.
So 50% of new applications will be cloud-based. What are the attributes of cloud that are really, sort of driving this adoption? What are people looking at cloud for specifically?
So I think what cloud gives you is the shift from CapEx to OpEx. In the traditional run the bank scenario, much of your IT procurement, your infrastructure build out is CapEx heavy, and what CapEx heavy, it's very rigid. It is very inelastic, and it creates a lot of challenges when it comes to a developer-centric scale, custom applications that are horizontal in nature. Cloud takes care of that, but it can also create headaches because now you are dealing with like a high degree of asset sprawl. You are dealing with systems that are outside of your direct asset management purview. And so what cloud gives you is that elasticity, but it also creates challenges, and hence the need to make cloud a part of your overall IT infrastructure build out or strategy.
All right, great. So with cloud on the rise, maybe you can address this chart. It looks like today we're kind of approaching that 70-30 split of cloud versus non-cloud. And it looks like the public adoption increase is nearly 20% and private cloud increase is about 32%. So is that at the expense of non-cloud environments? What's going on kind of here? What's this shift?
Yeah, so there's some interesting trends, and this was a survey that was done earlier this year. So IDC interviewed IT operations staff and line of business individuals at Fortune 1000 enterprises, and specifically in industries that are disrupted by digital transformation. So the first thing is there has been a dramatic shift to the cloud in the last 5 years. I mean, this is no secret; everyone knows this. And customers are not done yet. That's the sort of the headline here. People are still moving to the cloud. And what you're looking at here is a percentage of applications in a typical IT portfolio, and based on what the investments in cloud is today and what respondents consider to be an ideal state. There's been a clear shift from non-cloud environments to both private and public cloud. So it's not all public cloud, it's private and public cloud. And private cloud has done especially particularly well, as customers, transition from non-cloud, on-premises non-cloud environments to something that is not public cloud. And what I mean by that is that there are certain companies for whom public cloud is just not an option. They do not have the regulatory approvals, or they're just not ready to go to the public cloud. And for these companies, private cloud is a very attractive proposition. It gives you the benefits of public cloud without having to compromise on some of the challenges of giving up the physical location, the affinity, and all of the sort of the security that goes with it. And then finally, multi-cloud, which is combination of multiple on-prem and off-prem, public and private cloud resources, is becoming the default for customers. It's not just one or the other. It's not just public or private, but kind of a combination of on and off premises cloud environments.
Yes, I think you lovingly referred to it as asset sprawl. But is hybrid IT kind of the new normal then for most organizations?
Yeah, so before we sort of talk about that, sort of just to talk about what is hybrid IT. So today, I think hybrid IT is often misused. It's sort of used in sort of an out of context to represent a mashup of private and public cloud. People talk about hybrid IT and multi-cloud sort of interchangeably, and that's not the case. Just a mashup of multiple clouds without much of a strategy to bind together two disparate worlds together. That's not hybrid cloud. It is that when you do that mashup, the result is often mixed. It's inconsistent, and the success varies from company to company and industry to industry. And almost all respondents here state that their firms have hybrid IT in place today. We sort of peel it and look under the covers. What they're really referring to is a multi-cloud environment. And furthermore, all the firms with a hybrid IT environment today, have their core applications, their core business applications deployed in multiple locations. Now, what is hybrid IT? I think it is really combining multiple cloud environments and on-prem and off-prem environments, but the combination has to be done with a strategy. It has to have a sort of a fabric in place that governs where the application gets placed, How does it get placed? How are the assets managed? So it's got a sort of a policy process fabric that governs those locations. And really what the benefit to the business is having a mix or hybrid IT environment. It enables businesses to efficiently modernize their application portfolio, move away from just a sort of a rigid CapEx environment to an OpEx friendly environment, and focus on speed, performance, while maintaining the steady state apps, which are so essential for their bread and butter revenue.
Yeah, I see in the call out there in the upper right, I guess that is, that you've, saying that the focus shifts from efficiency and cost savings to speed and performance, but speed and performance for what? For the applications, or are you referring to speed like time to market and being responsive to the business?
That's right. It's the latter. It's not. We're not talking about speeds and feeds from from an infrastructure side here. We're talking about IT as a service broker responding to the business. And when I talk about the word rigid, it is essentially the situation that exists in many traditional IT environments where in order to grow, in order to add more resources to your infrastructure, you have to follow a very sort of a rigid, archaic process, which involves multiple people doing multiple things. And ultimately, from the time you make the request to the time you actually get a functional instance up and running, you're looking at weeks, days. And this is not a sustainable situation as we, embrace digital transformation.
Okay. So I guess that, this is really causing organizations to operate and manage differently their on and off premises environments. So if you're going to maintain this mix of cloud, non-cloud, public, private, clearly you're going to need to modernize your data center and your edge locations to get the scale that you need and to make everything more efficient, reduce that management overhead. So I guess that brings into the discussion the need for software-defined infrastructure. So maybe you could just talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. So as the title suggests, really the objective of software-defined infrastructure is to provide open and elastic automation in IT. And it's not a singular entity. It is not a product. It is a process. It's a transformation of multiple things. And if you talk about SDI in the context of hybrid IT, what is really needed is a distributed infrastructure model, a deployment model, if you will, that scales well to meet the requirements of an IT service broker strategy. So if IT is a service broker, if IT is the pay-as-you-go model for internal businesses or for business units, then it's really SDI is the means through which you can embrace digital transformation effectively, both cost-wise as well as time and process-wise. And in the era of digital transformation, we know that apps and data are distributed. So therefore, the infrastructure that on which these apps and data sets sit on has to be distributed as well. It has to be elastic. It has to run in the core data center. It has to also run in the edge and in the cloud. And then in terms of on-premises, which is your own data center, or it could be a hosted or a co-located facility, companies need to shift from a rigid, centralized, hardware-centric approach to a distributed, software-centric or a software-defined and a flexible approach. And if you don't shift, then and if your systems tend to be siloed, they're not connected, what you're risking is a lopsided approach and a sort of a disparate approach where and you risk sort of losing out on the whole DX wave. And so when you look at software defined and you going back to what the slide is showing, there are four key areas to examine. The first is platforms. So we're looking at a hardware intelligence that is decoupled from the software. And that is what gives it the elasticity and openness. From a value perspective, again, because of that disconnect, you're looking at speed, agility, and efficiency. Automation is the third spoke. You're going beyond provisioning and configuration to sort of the orchestration. I mentioned the role played by developers. When you allow the developers to manage resources on their own, then you're going beyond just your provisioning and configuration. You're going into sort of a fully automated orchestration and automation system. And then what that gives you is unified units of IT, not storage, networking, and compute. It's a unified IT delivery model. And then finally, policy-driven, unified service orchestration, API-based, which allows you to enforce service-level agreements. And so what ultimately you get out of this is IT as a service broker. And it goes from being a facility provider as a hardware provider to an internal cloud service provider, which enables it to combine people, process, and governance and technology to support long-term business objectives. You are providing an operating platform that is centered around data and information and custom cloud-native applications, basically, it's the vehicle through which companies can do DX. Yeah.
So the takeaway that I get from this is that if you really want to be driving the type of agility that you need to be digitally transformed as an organization, you've got to look at adopting strategies that combine some of these on-premises resources with cloud. And I think to your point, having software-defined infrastructure is kind of key in all of this. But then you also have to look at how do you operate and manage across all of these environments. So we're putting all of the simplicity and scale and things into the underlying solution that's going to support the applications, but then someone's got to manage it all. And again, you've got maybe these different operational silos and maybe manual processes. So, how do people address that? What's kind of the role of management here?
Yeah, and that's a great point. We cannot just talk about hardware and software as independent entities. It is really a combination. And so in a sort of a typical hybrid cloud scenario, what you're looking at is a sort of an API-driven management scheme where your hardware intelligence is available to the software, and the software then provides that orchestration, automation, and the whole life cycle of infrastructure, regardless of where the infrastructure is located, but doing justice to the attributes of the infrastructure. And that policy management is really in looking at what the end result is. So if you are looking at hybrid IT for your traditional applications, then it provides you these sort of attributes that are required for these traditional applications to run. So high performance external storage as an example, or high performance compute as an example. And whereas when you start to look into containerized applications, custom cloud native applications, then this very software can provide developer APIs that can be integrated with the workflow solutions that the developers are adopting, their methodologies like CI/CD and DevOps, and then it provisions these IT units, these unified IT units, in a format that is suitable for these custom apps. So, for example, containers, or for example, even function as a service, or even virtualization, if you so really want to go there. But most of the newer apps tend to sort of move away from traditional virtualization to newer forms of virtualization. So, needless to say, operating and managing across a hybrid environment is complex. And complexity can create operational friction that slows people down and holds businesses back. And the solution here is a management software paradigm that eliminates all of these points of friction, eliminates all of these contentious areas, and provides you a sort of a unified view across all your resources.
So I think what we've been describing in that conversation kind of fits well with HPE's software-defined portfolio. HPE's strategy has been focused on simplifying hybrid IT, and we've got a lot of momentum for both simplifying on-premises and now simplifying hybrid cloud. So, if I look at the software-defined infrastructure portfolio that HPE offers, we have OneView, which is approaching 1 million licenses at this point. And OneView really helps our customers transform their infrastructure into software-defined infrastructure. We also have HPE Synergy, which is a single software-defined infrastructure solution that combines compute, storage, and fabric so that all of the resources are available to run any application. And you can offer up those resources with a lot of flexibility. You can compose and recompose them very, very easily. And then we have our HPE SimpliVity solution, which is our hyperconverged infrastructure product. And that's used by organizations to really simplify their virtual machine environments. And then more recently, we introduced our ProLiant-based Microsoft Azure solution, which will enable Azure Cloud on premises. And then also newly introduced is HPE OneSphere, which is our offering to simplify the management of customers' hybrid cloud environments. So I'll go into a little bit more detail on those solutions in a bit, but one of the things I wanted to have you address is, if our audiences are adopting these software-defined solutions on premises and then also adopting cloud, what's in it for them? How do they benefit?
So this particular, this slide is very personal to me because I've spent a lot of sleepless nights on the left-hand side looking at the data center in a sort of a boxed way and the challenges that it poses when you think about, a constrained model, which is centralized. Everything is in a single location. Everything is hardware-centric, very rigid. I think from a mind frame and a strategy perspective, if you move away from a data center specific or data center constrained model to more of a distributed software defined and a flexible model. So first it's the mindset, it's the mind frame. Then and the second is the strategy that looking at a distributed infrastructure model and how it can scale to meet the requirements of IT as an internal service broker, which means you are as IT catering to the bread and butter apps, managing the sort of the bank as it runs, and then IT as a service broker for next gen apps, catering to the developers who are developing new data-centric streams. And the right-hand side, what it shows there is how you should look at your infrastructure. And the reason why I have it in concentric circles is because you really need to start out in a single location, your core. We're not asking you to abandon the core. Your core is central to the business, but as you can see, it's shrunk considerably because now you are expanding beyond that core, looking at the cloud as an additional tier where your assets can live, and then expanding beyond the cloud, looking at the edge where some of your assets could live depending on something like an Internet of Things strategy, or if you have connected devices, for example. And then let's not forget endpoints. We live in a world where everything is connected and all of your interactions happen through some or the other connected device. And so it is essential to make that indirectly make that a part of your IT infrastructure. And one thing is for sure, digital transformation initiatives can have a more predictable and reliable outcome when organizations switch to this kind of a thinking and this kind of a model for distributed multi-premises software-defined infrastructure.
That's great. Thank you. So what steps does our audience need to take today to proactively, get this hybrid IT approach right and achieve these types of business outcomes?
Yeah, so I think the key things here are, first, IT needs to manage across resources that span multiple cloud environments. Cloud here meaning public cloud, on-prem, off-prem. It is really about looking at a unified consumption-centric view of all on and off premises resources that deliver, ultimately visibility into the economics of that infrastructure, the health of that infrastructure, how it's performing, both as a sort of a speeds and feeds wise, as well as how is it performing from a service level agreements perspective, and then of course the utilization of the tier. Is it in the red zone from a utilization perspective, or is it in the healthy green zone? And how do you make sure it stays in the green zone to factor in elasticity and unpredictable spikes in your environment? So the second is, I think this goes without saying, but flexibility means that IT needs to be able to provide premises agnostic, composable resource allocation, whether it's compute, storage, networking, pools that are both available to current generation applications that use them in one way, and then of course next generation applications that use them in another way. So current generation applications might be bare metal or virtualization. Next gen apps might be containerized, but the pool based strategy allows you to have a fluid, so a common approach, but catered to the application type. And then, of course, your front-end pay-per-use metered consumption model makes sure you can have a chargeback model in place for both types of apps. And then lastly, by deploying some kind of a software-defined infrastructure. So, for example, you could think about hyper-converged infrastructure, composable infrastructure as elements of this SDI model. IT can speed up application delivery, and this is where the service levels come in. How quickly can you allocate resources? How quickly can you go from concept to production? Here, it is important to note that in order to have a comprehensive and scalable infrastructure as code, an API toolkit is necessary, and this is it's necessary because not only does it allow IT to automate the infrastructure resources, but also provide integration with developer-centric approaches like DevOps and CI/CD, and now you can have infrastructure that sort of consumed across the board and managed across the board, and therefore it shifts from being an infrastructure management domain to an application delivery, an accelerated application delivery domain.
Yeah, so I think at this point, I'd love to provide kind of an overview of some of the HPE software-defined and cloud management solutions to kind of bring to light a lot of the things that you've been talking about. And I think when you mentioned API Toolkit, that's definitely an area where HPE is doubling down with a lot of its solutions. So I'll start off with OneView, which I had a brief introduction earlier. This is really a solution that takes software-defined and a programmatic approach to managing infrastructure. It also integrates some workflow automation and a dashboard, and then of course our very comprehensive partner ecosystem along with it. And with OneView, we're delivering a very simple, efficient IT infrastructure with these automated workflows. It has built-in infrastructure automation engine that's designed with software intelligence. And it's going to streamline provisioning, lifecycle management across compute, storage, and fabric. And that's really going to enable IT staff to control resources programmatically through that unified API. It also includes templates, so domain experts can model important settings in software such as RAID configuration and BIOS settings and firmware and SAN volumes and other things. And then, HPE infrastructure, with OneView can be configured, monitored, updated, and repurposed with really a single line of code. So this is going to, as I said, allow IT teams to more effectively meet their goals and the needs that are changing rapidly in their environment. SimpliVity is another solution in our software-defined infrastructure portfolio, and this is all-flash, pre-integrated, hyper-converged building block that will dramatically simplify IT by combining all hyper-converged infrastructure and advanced data services for virtualized workloads, so that you can really have a VM-centric management point of view for your environment and VM mobility. It also includes data protection and very unique data efficiency using deduplication and compression that's all delivered on an HPE ProLiant system. So, if you look at your data center environment, typically, you've got, up to a dozen different types of software and hardware to, run applications and manage the environment. And what SimpliVity Hyperconvergence is doing is it's combining all of that functionality of up to like a dozen, discrete devices into that single building block. And so that, convergence of all of those technologies really reduces the cost and the complexity of the IT environment. And as I said, it does have that unique data efficiency with always-on compression and deduplication, which not only creates efficiency from a capacity, your storage capacity and network bandwidth standpoint, but it actually also improves application performance. Another thing that SimpliVity does is it has a centralized global management that lets administrators manage all of their operations from the hypervisor management console, for example, VMware vCenter or Microsoft SCVMM. And this is going to allow administrators to rapidly update policies across the entire environment. And then the last thing I would call out with SimpliVity is that it also eliminates the need for third-party data protection because it has built-in backup recovery and disaster recovery. And that leverages the deduplication and compression that's being done on production data in real time. You get all those benefits naturally when you perform a backup. And that, is going to deliver the resilience and, bandwidth efficient replication that you need to ensure data integrity and availability in the solution. And then we have HPE Synergy. This is our solution that has compute storage and fabric in a single pool of resources that can be configured according to the needs that you have for whatever application you're going to deploy. So the HPE Synergy Composer will leverage the software-defined intelligence to kind of accelerate operations through a single interface. And this will allow IT to compose and recompose logical infrastructure very rapidly. And that means that IT is now able to effortlessly assemble infrastructure building blocks at the size needed for the enterprise. And then you can also automatically update firmware, set BIOS settings, configure network connectivity, and other things through that solution. The net is that Synergy really offers a dynamic, flexible, and very cost-effective infrastructure that introduces these efficient operations for IT staff, which will in turn improve their productivity. And then we have OneSphere, which is one of our newer additions, and this is an as-a-service hybrid cloud management platform that will provide that end-to-end control of your hybrid IT environment. So it's going to allow for IT, business leaders, and developers to all leverage this solution, and that will help them get the views into their workflows or dashboards or whatever it is that they need so that they can more effectively work together and be self-sufficient. So as I said, it is as a service. We're hosting the application in the cloud and offering access to people through a portal. And that will really simplify the management. It'll provide that unified view so that, IT can compose clouds capable of supporting both traditional and cloud-native applications. Developers can self-service provision what they need. And then business leaders can get access to near real-time reporting for everything that's going on in the environment including cost. And cost is one of those things that really bubbles up as a top use case. Controlling, what resources are being used and controlling spending is something that's often difficult for some teams. And so we're providing those cross-cloud insights that will help business leaders understand where their investments are being made and how they're being used. And that will hopefully allow them to make better decisions regarding workload placement and improve efficiency. And then fast application deployment is another use case, and there it's really about enabling developers to be more autonomous, sort of give them the fenced-in backyard that they can play within the fence line and not get into trouble. IT sanctions an environment, and then they can self-service within that environment that's been carved out for them. And then for delivering IT as a service in general, I think that's what Ashish was talking about earlier, where letting IT become sort of this service broker. And if we're providing these flexible resources and application management through HPE OneSphere, we're able to provide a consistent experience and enable self-service and dynamic provisioning of resources and other things that allow IT to deliver IT as a service. So moving on from here, I'm going to throw it back to Ashish because I think it's clear that HPE IT, and not HPE IT is complex, but hybrid IT is complex. So maybe you can shift into, what companies can do to accelerate their digital transformation by taking the right steps to kind of automate and manage their hybrid IT environment. So from a IDC perspective, what would you recommend?
Yeah, so let's so taking a technology, partnerships, and people view, I think that really let's touch upon what matters most. Having the right technology is important. Having the right partnerships is important as well. And then finally, people is everything. So whether it is IT operations staff, application developers, and of course, line of business executives who feel empowered to sort of have an influence on the direction that IT takes. They all agree that hybrid IT is bound to fail if it cannot ultimately deliver on sort of the core set of requirements. Those requirements are first, optimizing cost and management application performance across on-prem and public cloud. What hybrid IT gives you is it enables businesses with an on-premises and multi-cloud strategy to optimize cost across these resources. Second, it gives you is a continuous DevOps platform. So hybrid IT serves as a continuous delivery platform with integration between the developer side and the operations side, one that represents a common set of APIs and access portals for on-premises and off-premises resources. So third is to enable IT operations to become a virtual cloud service provider. So hybrid IT empowers the IT organization to take on the role of a virtual cloud service provider or an internal service broker, as you would call it, as a part of their core competency. It frees the operations folks from doing tactical, mundane stuff to doing more strategic, or implement more strategic initiatives. And then lastly, if you think about infrastructure as code, what hybrid IT gives you is it champions a low ops model in which the entire infrastructure is software defined. It is treated as code, which means it's delivered and managed via resources that call APIs. Ultimately, it is a software defined infrastructure. It enables provisioning from fluid resource pools. And these provisioning tasks can be completed in minutes compared with traditional IT provisioning tasks that can take hours, days, and even months in many cases. So it's really about bringing that agility and scalability and flexibility in IT in a cost-effective manner.
That's great. Thank you, Ashish. And, all of the information that's been shared here is super informative. And, our intent, today with our audience is to, share these new strategies that you can use to streamline and automate your environment when you have this, kind of hybrid IT world, and ultimately accelerate your digital transformation. We do realize, though, that some customers are in different places on that digital transformation or cloud adoption journey. So I just wanted to mention that, HPE also offers services that can advise customers of their, options for digital transformation and hybrid cloud adoption. So we have our Point Next organization, which is HPE Services Arms, and I also have the Cloud Technology Partners logo up there. That's an acquisition that happened in the last couple of months. And this organization can assist with cloud strategies and consulting on security and governance, as well as, operating a multi-cloud environment. And then, of course, we have the portfolio of HPE solutions that helps you power your applications and your data with our innovative software-defined and cloud solutions. And then on the consumption side of things, again, I point back to Point Next. Point Next offers a number of services related to, operating your environment and turning your on-premises into pay-for-use consumption model. So I think Ashish talked about that earlier, where people are looking to shift from that CapEx to OpEx model. And we do offer HPE GreenLake Flex Capacity, which can help deliver that type of experience in from a pay-for-use consumption model. And then also kind of taking it to the next level, our Point Next organization also has HPE GreenLake solutions. There's a number of them listed here that take that pay-for-use consumption model to the next level and really base it on the outcomes that you get. So if you set specific SLAs for backup, that's really the unit of consumption with this solution. So I'm going to just turn things back over to Andy and see if we have any questions that we need to address.
Great. Thanks, Lauren and Ashish. That's been really informative, so thank you. We now have a few minutes for a question. As a reminder, you can go into the GoToMeeting panel and submit your question there. And while we're waiting for a few questions to come in, let me also share that you can go to the website listed here at hpe.com/hybrid to get some other assets that may be of interest to you. As Ashish shared earlier in the session, IDC recently completed The Future of Hybrid IT Made Simple, and this paper with other assets are available on this website, so I encourage you to go there. So Lauren and Ashish, we have a few questions coming in, so let me kick it off with a question for Ashish. Ashish, what's the difference between hybrid IT and hybrid cloud? I know you touched upon this a little bit, but just wanted to see if you could clarify that point specifically.
Sure. So let's talk about hybrid cloud first. I think hybrid cloud just talks about a deployment that spans multiple clouds. It doesn't really talk about how that deployment is carried out, what kind of clouds are involved. It's just a term that is used to describe multi-cloud, you could argue, is a sort of a replacement for it. Hybrid IT, on the other hand, is a strategy. It's a lot more complex in how you would implement it, a lot more nuanced, and it ultimately is driven by a sort of a vision and a strategy that ultimately drives much of what IT does, and it has both a technology and a people and process angle to it, not just a technology. So we're not just talking about multiple clouds here, we're also talking about the process and the people who carry it out.
Excellent. And one follow-up question for you is, hybrid IT may be well known for IT, but what are you ultimately hearing from customers about what's top of mind for the business? For instance, strategy, is it about ways to speed up delivery, faster access to resources? What is top of mind for the business?
So I think the top of mind for business is, how can I remain competitive in the future, in the digital economy, and what are the vehicles through which I can get there? Hybrid IT is one of the vehicles that businesses think of as a means to not just keep their revenue intact, but also build new revenue streams, build new engagement models, build more insight, get more insight from the data they collect. So it's really about you know, as if I may, changing the engines of a plane when it's flying, right? So they want to be able to do that mid-air without any disruption to the business, and hybrid IT is the way to get there.
Thank you. And Lauren, there's one question for you. It says, if I have a management for my on-premises environment, how can I extend that into the cloud?
HPE OneSphere, of course. That's a shameless plug for one of our products. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, today those organizations have plenty of management solutions. When you think about all of the, you know, devices and data and applications and everything that you have to manage, there tends to be a lot of consoles that you have to go to manage everything. You know, some of that gets bubbled up into more comprehensive solutions, but I think when you're talking about trying to get one view into what's happening with your on-premises environment and, you know, the applications and resources that you're using in the cloud, I think OneSphere is a solution that really kind of fits very well.
Great. And I guess the last question that I see in here is, what's the difference between infrastructure management and cloud management? You obviously just mentioned OneView and OneSphere, so maybe help to clarify that point.
Yeah, so I'm sorry if I flubbed the two names. I often get them confused. So OneView is really about infrastructure management, and that does focus more on the on-premises infrastructure, and OneSphere is more focused on that multi-cloud management, and it can extend to managing resources on premises as well. So the difference from my perspective is infrastructure management, you know, you're taking care of a lot of the life cycle management and other things associated with those on-prem infrastructure that you have. The cloud management piece, you're not necessarily managing the hardware or infrastructure in the cloud because someone else is taking care of that for you, right? That's why you go to a cloud model. But you do have resources to manage, and you do have applications to manage, and getting those views into what's happening with those. And I think the points that Ashish was making earlier about, you know, kind of understanding the hybrid cloud, what the deployment, you know, that you have spanning those multiple clouds, how you get your arms around all of it.
Excellent. Well, I think that's it for the question. So at this point, I'd like to thank everyone sincerely for participating in today's webinar. And I'd also like to thank our speakers, Ashish from IDC and Lauren Whitehouse from HPE. So again, have a great day and thank you.
Thank you.